Most people think this video is going to be about discipline or sacrifice or cutting out small pleasures, but that's not the real story here, because the uncomfortable truth is far more brutal than that. The real problem isn't that you don't make enough money, and it isn't that the system is stacked against you, and it definitely isn't that you were unlucky. The real problem is that somewhere along the way, you were taught to believe the wrong things about money, and those beliefs quietly guide your decisions every single day, even when you don't realize it. And that's dangerous, because every decision compounds either in your favor or against you, and most people are compounding in the wrong direction without ever stopping to ask why. Kevin O'Leary built his fortune by noticing this pattern early, and once you see it, you can't unsee it, because it explains almost everything about why some people escape the paycheck to paycheck trap while others stay stuck forever. Here's what most people don't want to hear, but desperately need to. Being broke is rarely about income, because there are people making modest salaries who quietly become wealthy, and there are people making six figures who are constantly stressed, over-leveraged, and one missed paycheck away from disaster. That contrast exists because money doesn't respond to how hard you work or how badly you want it. Money responds to behavior. It responds to what you buy, why you buy it, and what you expect that purchase to do for you. And this is where everything starts to unravel, because most people are buying things they think will move them forward, but are actually dragging them backward. They believe they're making progress, but in reality, they're just running faster on the same treadmill. Kevin's core principle sounds simple, almost too simple, but it's ruthless in its clarity. Rich people buy assets. Poor people buy liabilities and convince themselves they're assets. That single misunderstanding quietly drains millions of lives. Because when you believe something is helping you, you stop questioning it. And when you stop questioning it, it keeps taking from you month after month, year after year, until one day you wake up older, tired, and wondering why nothing ever changed. And the worst part is that most of these purchases feel normal. They're encouraged, they're praised, they're wrapped in social approval, which makes them even harder to see as the problem. This is why people get defensive when these conversations start, because it feels personal. It feels like an attack on their lifestyle, their choices, even their identity. And that's exactly why Kevin leans into the discomfort, because comfort is expensive, and most people are paying for it with their future. This isn't about skipping coffee or living miserably. This is about 5 specific categories of spending that quietly sabotage wealth while pretending to do the opposite. And once you understand the first one, it changes how you see everything else that follows, because it reveals a pattern most people never connect. The first thing Kevin tells people to stop buying immediately is brand new cars. And this is where emotions flare up, because cars feel practical, they feel necessary, they feel justified. But that emotional attachment is exactly what makes this mistake so costly. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, something irreversible happens. Value evaporates. Not slowly, not over decades, but instantly. 20 to 30% disappears before you even make your first payment, and that loss isn't theoretical. It's real money that you worked for, now gone forever, traded for a smell that fades in a week. And it gets worse, because depreciation doesn't slow down to give you a break. Within the first year, the value keeps falling. By year 3, roughly half of what you paid is gone, and no amount of careful driving or pride of ownership changes that. You didn't buy transportation. You bought a rapidly shrinking pile of metal that demands maintenance, insurance, and attention, all while pretending to be an upgrade. But the real damage doesn't come from depreciation alone. It comes from how people pay for these cars. Most people don't buy new cars with cash. They finance them. That means they borrow money at 5, 6, sometimes 7% interest to purchase something that is guaranteed to be worth less every single day. That combination is devastating, because now you're losing value and paying interest at the same time. You're moving backward financially while convincing yourself you're moving forward. Kevin doesn't call this a mistake. He calls it financial suicide, because the math is that unforgiving. Then there's leasing, which sounds sophisticated and flexible, but is actually worse. Leasing means you're renting a depreciating asset, paying monthly for something you'll never own, and at the end of the contract, you hand it back with nothing to show for it. No equity, no asset, just a stack of payments that made someone else rich. Leasing doesn't solve depreciation. It just guarantees you absorb it while pretending you avoided it. And the dealership loves this because you become a predictable stream of income instead of an owner building value. Of course, the objections come quickly. People say they need reliability. They say they have kids. They say they need peace of mind. And Kevin doesn't argue with that because reliability isn't the problem. The problem is overpaying for it. A 3-year-old certified pre-owned car delivers nearly the same reliability, often with warranty coverage at a fraction of the cost. Someone else took the depreciation hit and you get the benefit. That's not deprivation. That's intelligence. That's how wealth quietly builds while no one is watching. This is where the psychological divide becomes obvious. Poor people spend money to look rich. Rich people spend money to get richer. One group is focused on appearances. The other is focused on outcomes. And the car you drive says nothing about your wealth. It signals taste, maybe status, but not financial strength. The real story is told by what you own that works while you sleep. And every unnecessary dollar tied up in a new car is a dollar that can't compound, can't earn dividends, can't buy freedom later. This first mistake matters so much because it sets the tone for everything else. When you prioritize looking successful over being successful, you start making decisions that feel good now but punish you later. And once that pattern takes hold, it spreads into bigger areas of your life, especially the one purchase society insists is the smartest thing you'll ever make. And that's exactly where Kevin goes next, because the second mistake is even more dangerous precisely because it's socially approved. The second thing keeping people poor is buying too much house. And this is where the lie runs deepest. For generations, people have been told that their home is their biggest asset, the cornerstone of their wealth, the proof that they've made it. But Kevin cuts through that story with a definition most people never stop to consider. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. And the house you live in takes money out of your pocket every single month without fail. Mortgage payments don't pause. Property taxes don't disappear. Insurance keeps rising. Maintenance is constant. Roofs wear out. Appliances fail. Lawns need care. Utilities climb. And the bigger the house, the bigger every one of those expenses becomes. What people call pride of ownership is often just a beautifully disguised cash drain. And while it's true that real estate can go up in value, that increase is unpredictable, uneven, and inaccessible unless you sell or borrow against it, which simply creates more debt. Kevin reminds people that debt is a tool, but only if you use it correctly. When you borrow to acquire assets that generate income or growth, debt works for you. When you borrow to acquire liabilities that demand constant payments, debt works against you. And most people blur that distinction because they've been told housing is special, exempt from the rules that apply to everything else. But math doesn't care about tradition. It only cares about cash flow. What really alarms Kevin is how aggressively people stretch themselves when buying homes. The bank approves them for a massive loan, so they assume that's what they should spend. But the bank's approval isn't a recommendation. It's a calculation of how much debt you can carry without collapsing, because the bank wants you locked into interest payments for decades. They don't profit from your freedom, they profit from your obligation. When you buy at the top of what you're approved for, you leave yourself no margin, no flexibility, no room to invest. And over a 30-year mortgage, the interest alone can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to the true cost of the home. That's money you'll never see again, money transferred directly from your future to the lender's balance sheet. And yet people celebrate this decision as adulthood, as success, as winning. Kevin's alternative sounds boring, which is exactly why it works. Buy half the house you're approved for. Choose function over fantasy. Ignore granite countertops and focus on cash flow. Because the real win isn't square footage. It's what you do with the money you don't spend. When you lower your housing costs, you free up capital every single month. And that capital can be invested, grown, and multiplied instead of buried in walls and flooring. This is where opportunity cost enters the picture, quietly but relentlessly. Every extra dollar locked into a house is a dollar that can't work elsewhere. Warren Buffett understands this, which is why he still lives in the same modest home he bought decades ago. Not because he can't afford more, but because he understands that unnecessary upgrades steal from compounding, and compounding is the engine of wealth. Once you see this, it becomes clear that wealth isn't built by dramatic moves. It's built by consistently choosing the option that looks smaller today but grows larger tomorrow. And that same logic applies to a habit so normalized that people rarely question it, even though it drains thousands of dollars a year with almost no resistance. And this is where the third mistake quietly tightens its grip because it feels harmless, even deserved. The third thing keeping people poor is eating out constantly, and this one hides behind convenience and exhaustion. After a long day, cooking feels like work and spending money feels like relief. A quick meal, a delivery app, a coffee on the way to work, none of it feels expensive in the moment, which is why it's so dangerous, because small expenses repeated daily become massive over time, and most people never add them up. The average person spends thousands every year eating out, and that number quietly compounds into something shocking when you look at it through an investment lens. Money spent on food you'll forget tomorrow could have been money earning returns for decades. And the trade-off isn't obvious until it's too late, because no one feels the future they're giving up in the present moment. Kevin isn't saying never eat out. He's pointing out that most people eat out by default, not by choice. They spend mindlessly, not intentionally, and then they claim they don't have money to invest, even as they hand over $15 for lunch without a second thought. The money exists. It's just leaking out through habits that feel too small to matter. This is where discipline quietly separates outcomes. Cooking at home isn't punishment, it's leverage. Packing lunch isn't deprivation, it's control. And when you do choose to eat out, making it deliberate transforms it from waste into value. The wealthy don't avoid pleasure, they avoid unconscious spending. And that distinction changes everything. Because once you start questioning where your money goes, you can't stop there. The same mindset that justifies constant dining out also justifies something else, something far more emotional, far more tied to identity. And that's exactly where Kevin goes next. Because the fourth mistake isn't just about money, it's about how badly people want to be seen. And this is where things get even more uncomfortable, because what comes next has nothing to do with hunger or shelter and everything to do with ego.